Welcome to She Considers a Field podcast with coach, encourager, and fellow entrepreneur and homeschooling mama of four, Anna McLaughlin. As a homeschooling entrepreneur, you are uniquely positioned to impact the kingdom of God both deep through your investment in your children and wide through your business. And yet guilt, frustration, and overwhelm can hold you back from all that God has for you. Come with me on a journey to walk in deeper peace, purpose, and joy, because God has given you a legacy to build, and I'm here to help you enjoy the ride.
Friends, I am so delighted to introduce to you Logan Hufford. Logan is a born and raised Alaskan, married to his gorgeous bride, Carrie, who herself is a fourth-generation Alaskan. And together they are raising four amazing but crazy little monkeys. You know, I know something about that. Their life is a simple one. They love their family time, their dogs, and exploring the beautiful Alaskan wilderness. And yet absolutely none of this should be possible today. For years, Logan did just about everything in his power to destroy his marriage and his life. Logan was a raging sex addict. Porn, affairs, hiring prostitutes, and more had simply become a way of life for Logan. He thought he had no hope. In 2016, God began to change all of that. Through recovery, God transformed Logan's life and his marriage. Logan and his wife Carrie now each lead recovery groups, doing what they can to give back by sharing the gifts that God has given. Friends, you're in for a treat. This episode is truly life-changing. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of She Considers a Field. Y'all, buckle up. This is going to be good. I'm going to preface really quickly before I introduce, I'm just going to introduce Logan Hufford with No Longer in Bondage. Logan, thank you so much for being here.
Anna, thank you so much for the opportunity to dive in. I'm very excited.
Me too. Okay, so I'm going to preview this episode just really quickly. We are going to be talking about a topic that if you have little ears in the room, you might want to pop your earbuds in. You might just want to be aware that there might be, this is a topic of, we're talking about sexual addiction and recovery, which is so important. It hits at the heart of who we are as people, how we were created in God's image. And so I'm just honored and grateful for Logan to facilitate this conversation. Now, here's how he phrased it before we got online. He said, if you have like a 10, 11-year-old in the room who's listening and you're willing to have hard conversations, this would be okay for them to listen to. I'm not saying, sit them down and have them listen necessarily, but we're just saying we're going to keep it respectful and honoring in our words. And we're talking about hard things here. Okay. So with that, Logan, I already said thank you for being here. So walk us in the front door of your story a little bit. Tell us what brought you to this place of having a passion for seeing people set free from sexual addiction.
Yeah. So I'm almost 34 years old, and I've been married since June 4th, 2011. We've got four boys. My wife, Carrie, and I, we've got four boys ranging from 12 to 8. So four boys in 5 years.
Wow.
And when I was 25 years old, I was a dad who believed in God, believed in Jesus as the Son of God who died for our sins, and believed in Scripture, went to church regularly, had all sorts of healthy morals and values that I believed in. And I was a dad who was completely addicted to pornography. I had multiple affairs over the course of the time that I got engaged to my wife, Carrie, up through 2015. I had just continual inappropriate relationships, texting conversations, all the seeking attention from women, flirting with women, a host of other unhealthy behaviors as well, like gambling addiction, closet smoker, just all sorts of things. But I mean, the sexual addiction was this gigantic monster that was in my life. And so having those beliefs, having that, if nothing else, having that head knowledge of Scripture, the head knowledge of, what my role should be as a dad, what my role should be as a husband. And every night completely hating my life, completely hating the fact that I was created, and completely hating the fact that I was a dad because my kids had me as their dad. Hating the fact that as a husband, not because of my wife, she was an incredible wife, always has been, but because she got me. Like, that is an incredibly dark place to live in. And that's the place that I lived in for a lot of years. And within a year or two of marriage and multiple affairs by that point already, I mean, I quickly gave up, and I just felt like there is no hope for me. I have done too much. There's no way I'll be able to stop, let alone have any sort of a good life, let alone lead a legacy that's anything other than just pain and trauma for everyone around me. I remember, laying in bed just going, God, why did you create me? Why did you create me? Yeah. So I got into recovery, and I mean, I realize I'm skipping ahead quite a bit, and I can skip back, but I was able to start to experience healing, start to gain traction. God completely flipped my life upside down in the best of ways, starting in 2016.
He does that.
And he did it. I mean, it's like he did it on his terms, right? He did it completely, just shut it down, and then broke it down, and then rebuilt it. My life, my marriage, my family, how I interact with the world around me. And that's been, 8+ years of recovery. And recovery is always going to be a part of my life. Accountability is always going to be a part of my life, but there's certainly a heavy emphasis over the last few years on giving back, on mentoring other men. And specifically right now, I'm doing whatever I can to, put this out there so that other people can see what God has done, so that other people can see that light. Cause I didn't think it was possible. I was like, I knew that people had experienced healing in various areas of life, and I didn't doubt God's power. I thought, I just doubted his power in my life. Because I'd done too much, which is such a foolish thing to think. And yet that's what I thought.
And yet, like, how representative of the human condition, right? That we get to that point where we're like, too far gone. I'm too far gone.
Yep.
So you said so much there. And really, this is like, and I just appreciate you laying out the kind of like struggle to redemption piece, and then we're just gonna like pick apart, right? Because and I shared this with you, but just to share with all of my people, with all of y'all, really my heart in bringing you on was, this is a conversation that needs to be brought into the light, because so often we're we suffer in silence to varying degrees as we navigate being in relationship with loved ones who may be dealing with an addiction of some kind. And so, to talk through how can we do this well? What does love look like here? So, but the piece that stuck out to me to start with in your story was that relatively early on, you talked about like hating that I was a dad, because then that meant my children had me as their dad, hating that I was a husband because that meant that my wife had me. And I think especially in the realm of sexual addiction, what it feels like in kind of the larger Christian context is there's almost this sense of like, well, it's about pleasure. And so there must not be an aware, it's selfishness, and there's not an awareness that it's wrong. But it sounds like from the beginning there was this despair that you were navigating.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that. Like, how does this play out? Because when we think about, like the sex act, when we think about like being drawn into pornography and things like that, the idea is, what comes to mind is pleasure, but that's not what you're describing.
Yeah. So a couple things right off the bat, I usually like to emphasize, and I speak a lot from I statements. I'm not going to, share too much about, what those people or this is like. Well, here's what my experience was. And yet I know a lot of folks that echo that. Sexual addiction, it's not an addiction to sex necessarily. It's not an addiction to sexual behavior even necessarily. It's highly associated with that, but it's it's an addiction where instead of a substance, I'm chasing after the high that I get from things associated with sexual deviancy. So yeah, having sexual contact with women was certainly a huge part of my addiction. Masturbation, pornography. I mean, these are huge parts of my addiction. But it certainly wasn't, oh, I'm not getting enough sex, or I need more, or it was a lot of the highs that I was chasing was the dopamine hits that I'm getting from this whole journey. When I would have an affair, it wasn't usually the physical contact that I was chasing. It was the attention. It was the affirmation from women, and chasing after new and different, chasing after just I want to get another one of those highs. I want to get another one of those highs, getting that text message back, getting that flirty comment back. That was a way of life for me. And it was something that I set the stage and planted the seeds as a teenager, and truly did not realize how much I was planting those seeds, and those seeds were growing roots, but it was all underground as far as I could see. And because as a kid, I was always shy. I always felt insecure, felt like girls wouldn't like me. I was ugly. Didn't think I could get a girl's attention. And so then that kind of stayed with me as a teenager. So as an older teen, young adult, as soon as I started to get some attention, some, positive affirmation from a female in front of me, I was like, whoa, okay. I can actually get some attention. I can get a girl to like me. And then I am chasing that. And as I had a serious relationship with Carrie, which pretty quickly we got married, not only did marriage not stop that, having a family did not stop that. I chased after it just even more. The addiction progressed and progressed. All addictions are progressive. I need more. I need something different. I need something harder. Sexual addiction is no different than any other addiction in that way.
So I think that one of the things, and some of this conversation is going to be a learning opportunity for me, because this is a world that is, I know about addiction in many forms, but this is a world that is it's a different language for me. So talk to me about when you say marriage didn't solve the problem. What was the problem? What was missing, or what was the lack of understanding? If you were to be able to look back at yourself, as a young adult, as an older teen, what was the gap that kind of opened the door for the addiction to take hold?
I mean, nothing was missing outside of myself. And I just want to make sure that that's extremely clear. It was the thing that was missing was I'll be honest, I don't usually think about it as something missing. I usually think about it as a negative thing that existed, although I think both things are true.
Okay. Yeah.
I had trained myself, starting as a kid, with pictures in a JCPenney catalog of women in swimwear and lingerie. That was my introduction to porn, which, by any definition of pornography, that most people would not count that, right? But
mom has it sitting on the kitchen table to look through. Yes, right. Absolutely.
And yet that was the first time that I sexually objectified pictures of women, which it's well, if that's not a definition of porn, then what is, right? So that sexually objectifying pictures of women, that was my introduction. Didn't know how sex worked, didn't know how masturbation worked, didn't know any of that, but I knew I liked how I felt when I looked at that. And then, then pictures of nudity, and then hardcore videos, in high school years. And so this progression of, chasing after those feelings, chasing after new and different. And this is where, we could do a whole series on this, but just the destructiveness of porn, the power of pornography. Even if somebody's not a Christian, even if somebody doesn't have the spiritual or moral basis, it's it is so completely destructive to the human body, to the human mind, to chase after and then get whatever I want, right? I can pick whatever video I want. I can pick whoever I want. I can turn it off. I can change what I get to control all of it.
Sorry, because I want you to keep going, and I want to make sure that I hear this piece from you, because there's a question even among Christian circles of is pornography adultery, or should it be kind of like cut off as a no, we're not even going here. Like, I would love to hear your take on that as you're kind of talking through the destructive effects of pornography. Like, tell us
Yeah.
more.
I guess I would say, yeah, porn should only be cut off if you want to be monogamous. If you're cool sharing your spouse, then I guess porn would be included. But yes, I mean, porn is infidelity. I'm sexually putting myself with that person. I'm sexually inviting somebody else. And if I'm single, I mean, we could go into, well, I'm preparing myself, I'm training myself in a terrible way. Even if I'm single and I'm never going to get married, just at the bare minimum, I'm training myself that I get what I want, when I want, how I want. That's so unhealthy. That's so immature. And those are understatements, but it is absolutely those things. So yeah, porn, 100%, it's cheating. 100%, it's infidelity, and it's just so destructive.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so good. And I'd heard you say that before in another interview that I listened to you give, of just talking about, and if I recall correctly, you were basically saying, because there's no one on the other side, in some ways it's, I don't want to put words in your mouth. It was like, you almost said, it was like, it's almost worse than an affair because there's a human being on the other side of one. Is that
right?
Tell me what you said.
Yeah, and the overthinker in me is like trying
I
to
know. I'm arguing, right?
because out of context, I mean, you could totally be offended or rip apart what I'm about to say, but stay with me. I won't say that it's worse. It's just different. Yeah. And yeah, I was talking with Tanya, and with on that interview with her, we dove into this. If I'm addicted to pornography, it is teaching me things. It is teaching me destructive things that are different than what I'm getting taught by chasing after an affair. Because if for me to seek out an emotional or sexual affair of any kind, of course it's destructive and it's wrong. Again, we're not ranking offenses.
Yeah.
But there's some physical risk there. There's the chance that I'm rejected. I mean, on some level, even if it's only at the most minimal level, I have to build rapport. I have to build some sort of connection. I have to deliver something to that other human being for any sort of consensual affair. So from a moral standpoint, of course, it's all evil. It's all sin. It's all adultery. But what porn does is it actually, from a power and control standpoint, which so much of addiction, I mean, it's so much of sin, right? I mean, it boils down to power and control. I want to be able to choose what I want. I want autonomy. I don't want God or you or my spouse or anyone to tell me what to do. So what porn does is it allows me to have all the power and control. And that's where, like, even in an affair, I don't get to have all the power and control. Mm-hmm. Now, the way that I chased after affairs, I certainly tried to get that. You know, I'm going to say this as kind of a preface, I guess, to our whole discussion here. I'm going to use some verbiage that might sound kind of clinical. It might sound cold, and I certainly don't mean it to be demeaning. I'm not trying to minimize. What I'm trying to do is avoid being triggering as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And I certainly am trying to paint old Logan as accurately as possible. Mm-hmm. So I groomed myself to become a predator. Mm-hmm. And how I would pursue women and contact with women was absolutely as a predator pursues prey. Mm-hmm. I identified women that I saw as vulnerable, as likely prey items. This is a disgusting way to think, and that's how I thought. That's how I operated. Yeah. So I did what I could to get power and control, to seek after women and opportunities that seemed likelier to give me what I wanted. Yeah. Because so much of this ties back to, I want to be able to get what I want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love what you said of, like, all of sin, right? I mean, this takes us back to the garden. Yep. And my tendency as well is to be relatively bold in my statements about my own sin, because I think it sets us free, right? It just highlights the beauty of the cross, of just look what he brought us from. And I don't have to be afraid to call things addiction, to call things personality disorders, to call, whatever big words or potentially inflammatory sounding words we might
Right.
use, like you're talking about predator. It only highlights the goodness of God and the
Yep.
power of Christ to set us free from even that, because there are people who, whether they're listening and they're identifying for themselves, or they're in relationship with someone who is acting in a role that is very dark and very difficult, like even there, right? Even there, the cross can intervene and can set us free. So I resonate with that and do the same as well. Okay, so take me. You're in this cycle, and you're in this self-loathing. Like, how did the light come through? How did God? Because you talked about you said that he shut it down, broke it down, and rebuilt it, which is just, I just think about that. I think it was John Donne's poem, batter my heart, three-person God, unless you break and all of this, then there's no healing. So you lived that. How did it come about? Take us there.
So I would love to share this little metaphor that is so powerful. It's been extremely powerful for me, and I hope it can be powerful for anyone listening. Is C.S. Lewis in the one of the Narnia books, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader.
Yes.
And I'll try to make this quick, but this character Eustace in this book, he's greedy, and he seeks after treasure, and he gets the treasure, and he becomes a dragon.
Yes.
And he becomes this monstrous thing. And at first there's a certain element of like, he's powerful, and it's kind of fun, and it's kind of cool, and he's got all the, it's not quite what he imagined, but he's got a lot of power. And then pretty quickly he's like, I don't want to be a dragon anymore. I can't have connection with humans. I can't have relationships. I can't, nothing. I don't have anything except for treasure and power and loneliness.
Yes.
And so he decides he doesn't want to be a dragon anymore. And so he tries to remove his dragon skin. And he does what he can to remove his dragon skin by himself. And he's like ripping it off, and it's growing back, and he can't get to it. And he rips off a layer, and then there's another layer, and he rips off it. And Aslan, of course, who's God in the Narnia stories, Aslan the lion says, "You've got to let me do it. I have to be the one to remove your dragon skin." Mm-hmm. And the verbiage in this, and it's all, I love C.S. Lewis, and I wonder, maybe I haven't studied his life. I don't know how familiar he was with addiction. Obviously, we're talking 80 years ago. Yeah. The world in general was not very familiar with addiction the way that they are now. But I mean, so much of his writing is so beautiful, and it connects with addiction.
Yes.
And talks about how painful it was. But Eustace has I always remember this quote: "I was pretty nearly desperate. So I just lay back and let him do it."
Yes.
And it doesn't hold back. Like, it doesn't get graphic, but it doesn't hold back on how painful and how destructive Aslan is. Mm-hmm. Like, Aslan is not tweaking. Aslan is not fixing. He's not, doing a little here. No, he's destroying Eustace. But he's destroying the dragon.
Yes.
And then when he's done, Eustace is a boy. He's been transformed. He's been healed. And then when he splashes into the water, and it hurts because he doesn't have his exoskeleton.
Yes.
So it's like this perfect picture, and that's meant to represent salvation. And yet I would argue, like, I honestly think it's a better metaphor for recovery.
Yes. No, I agree with you on that. Absolutely.
And because number one, there were many nights as I lay, hating myself and hating that I was on this earth, like, and I would ask God to heal me. But looking back on it, I didn't so much want God to heal me. I wanted him to just fix me, just, mm-hmm. touch a button and make me not be this way, because healing takes time and it takes work. And I didn't necessarily want to do that. Yep. And I wanted to do it on my terms. Mm-hmm. And God was like, no, we're not doing it the Logan way.
Yes.
I want to give you a little bit of context, starting from when we got married, or shortly after we got married, up through 2015. I gave my wife, Carrie, a series of staggered confessions of sexual infidelity. 6 months after we got married, I gave her the first confession. I wrote her a letter, and I told her that I had these sexual affairs. I don't remember how many it had been. I think 3 at that point. And in my head, I truly felt like, oh, I'm never going to do it again. I feel so bad. I'm never going to do it again. But nothing about my infrastructure changed. There was no repentance. So I did it again. And then every time I would have a full-on physical sexual affair, I would confess again. I wouldn't confess all the porn. I wouldn't confess all the flirting and all that stuff, but I would confess the physical affairs because it felt bad enough. Because so it was still all about me. It was I feel better getting this off my chest.
Yes.
So I confessed multiple times, multiple affairs, never did anything different with my behavior. And in July of 2015, and this carries a lot of weight with me because this is coming from Carrie's mouth. She would tell you now, as she shares her testimony, this was the most painful affair that I ever had, for a few different reasons. And after this affair, and I confessed this to her, she did something that she'd never done before. And she gave me an ultimatum. She said, if you don't get serious help and make change, then you will lose me and you will lose the boys. We had 3 boys and she was pregnant with our youngest, Isaiah. And I believed her. That scared me very much. And so that was the summer of 2015. I didn't get sober until May 19th, 2016. So there's almost a year between then and actually starting to get some real traction.
Yeah.
But I did start to do things differently. I started to go to some groups. I started to reach out to people. I started to be vulnerable. And if you think that the verbiage I just said is weak verbiage, it is, but it's accurate.
Yeah.
Like I started to do some things, but there was definitely some checking of the boxes and there was some bare minimum stuff. And at one point, I went to different groups, different types of groups, faith-based, non-faith-based. I mean, I wanted to find something that was faith-based, that was Christ-centered, but it can be hard to find those sorts of resources in general, and even more so in Alaska. We don't literally have igloos everywhere and dog sleds and stuff, but I mean, but there, there's
really?
a few hundred,
No?
but there's a few 100,000 people. It's not, there aren't just tons of resources all over the place. And I went to a Celebrate Recovery. So Celebrate Recovery is a faith-based group, which was cool. And I met a guy at that group named Rick, and they split off into men and women. And, no matter what your issues, your addiction or whatever you're there for, you split off into men and women. So each group maybe had like 20 people. And he and I were the only men at this group that said that, we're there. I'm here for sexual addiction. And he's about my dad's age. And he pulled me aside after the group and he's like, hey, I'm glad you're here. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate you sharing, man. That's cool. You need more than this group. And then he told me, he was like, man, he goes, Logan, I needed more than this group. And he shared a little bit of a story. He had decades of sexual addiction, decades of porn use. And he had been in recovery and healing. I don't remember how long, but maybe like a decade at that point. He's like, you need more, I think, than what this group has to offer. Because in hindsight, I didn't necessarily realize it at the time. Most recovery groups, and I love recovery, most recovery groups are very surfacey. It stems from this idea that they want it to be a safe place, which is totally reasonable. It needs to be a safe place. I need to feel safe to share and be vulnerable. But safety oftentimes gets transformed into a comfort zone because most recovery groups are set up in a way that a person shares how their week or their day has been or their story, and you're not allowed to give feedback. You're not allowed to ask them questions because that doesn't feel safe. It could scare them. It could offend them. And what that allows me to do, if I'm an addict, if I'm a manipulator, if I'm used to working the room and getting what I want from the room, I'm a liar. The last thing I needed was a comfort zone, free of feedback, free of me being grilled by people. So I could share just enough to feel good. And if that sounds familiar, it's like, yeah, I've been doing that to Carrie, right? All these years, sharing just enough to feel better. And so again, I didn't realize it at the time, but the groups that I'd been to, they were all that way where, people weren't allowed to give me feedback. And so he told me about a group called Prodigals. And he was like, at Prodigals, it's different. And he didn't go into all the nuts and bolts, but that's one of the
Yeah.
giant differences is it's heavy on feedback. It's heavy on people holding your feet to the fire and grilling you and asking you tough questions, not for the purpose of hurting your feelings, but if your feelings get hurt, it's okay.
Yeah.
In
It's
fact,
taking off the dragon skin, it sounds like.
yes, and that's 100%. I mean,
Yeah.
in Prodigals was this process of the dragon skin getting ripped off, and it wasn't fun and it wasn't easy. It wasn't quick, but I needed it.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to take a little side road for a minute, and of course it's no small conversation, but take me through what you can of where is Carrie in all of this? So she said like this is it, right? And how has she, to the extent that that she's comfortable with this piece of her story being shared, like how is she navigating these years of betrayal? And I think, and I just want to highlight too, like what you clarified, because Tanya Joya, whom you mentioned, was on this podcast as well over the summertime, and helped us understand the loop of addiction, right? That shame is part of it, confession's part of it, it's all going to be different now as part of it, that honeymoon period is part of it, and then the relapse is part of it, right? And so here she is walking this with you over the years, and then you're kind of starting to make steps towards healing. Like what is this looking like for her as she's raising the boys and kind of walking through this with you?
Yeah. And I appreciate what you said as far as, her story and her. So nothing that I will say from Carrie's end is speculation. All of this is stuff that she will willingly share, in her testimony, that she willingly shares with, ladies in her group for sexual betrayal trauma, because recovery has been a part of her life just as long as it's been a part of mine. So initially, those first several years of marriage, once I gave her that first confession, and of course she was heartbroken. She was blown away. She did not expect that. She did not, I believe this is accurate. She did not have like red flag concerns that I was having an affair. She knew that I struggled with pornography. I had told her that when we started dating. She knew that, but she did not expect to hear that I'd had affairs.
Yeah.
So for the next several years, she went from, shocked and of course hurt and still felt those things, but as with each confession started to get colder, started to get more numb, and just living in this state of shock from like the medical sense, right?
Yeah.
And she's in survival mode. She's trying to change diapers. So we've been a homeschool family the whole time. Now, of course, at this time we're homeschooling, but I mean, she's a stay-at-home mom. She's taking care of the monkeys. She's taking care of the kids. And, so she's cooking dinner or changing a diaper or, doing something around the house while her husband is, confessing his, the most recent affair, or while I'm off doing who knows what, or I'm in the bathroom looking at porn. And so she has no clue how to respond to that, but she certainly knows that she needs to be a mom, right? She needs to attend to the kids. And so she had no clue, what a healthy response looked like. And that's why, that ultimatum is such a crucial piece to this story, because like sometimes people will come up to her after like we share our testimony and they might say something like, this happened a couple times, where it's like, it's so incredible that you stayed with Logan. And that can be really hurtful, because the incredible thing isn't that she stayed with her husband. The incredible thing is that she had the strength to face her abuser and say, I can't control what you do, but I can control how I respond. Yeah. Because at that point, she had no external preparation from any human. She only had she had a strong leading. It had to be a strong leading from the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Because no human was in her life counseling her. And so after the ultimatum, and I started going to some groups, and like I remember she's went on some Facebook groups for sexual betrayal trauma, and I've shared I shared an Instagram video of just how depressing recovery content often is. And this is more of like from the addiction recovery standpoint.
Yeah.
And she would tell you the same thing from her standpoint. So much of the recovery content for sexual betrayal trauma is just this, it's this focus. And I she gets where it's coming from. I get where it's coming from, but it's just like this man-hating, resentful, cold, bitter, like, your husband sucks, mine does too.
Oh,
and there's no healing. And it's just it's tough. And again, like, I realize that might be hard to hear from me. But I speaking only what Carrie has clearly stated.
Yeah.
So she did what she could to try to, seek out some resources and some help. And after I got into, I joined the Prodigals. Well, I started going to Prodigals in March of 2016. And then in May, I got into the mentorship program, which is basically voluntary house arrest.
Mm-hmm.
Not from a legal standpoint, but I mean, from a practical standpoint, that's what it is. And it was a 2-year super intensive program where my freedoms, my rights as Logan were basically largely stripped away and partially given back with heavy duty accountability kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then in July of 16, Carrie joined a recovery group, Partners in Process, which was led by my mentor's wife, Patty. And that's a Christ-centered group for women who have suffered sexual betrayal trauma. And I can't share this without getting choked up, because if you know Carrie, there's a couple things about her. She's an incredible woman, incredible wife, incredible mom. And she's got a couple different traits. Number one, she's a very strong woman, incredibly resilient woman, incredibly independent woman. Like, she doesn't want flowers and a gift card to a clothing store for her birthday. She wants a Lowe's gift card. She wants a new spa. She wants a set of a tool set. So that's her. Like, she's the Alaskan girl. She's out there, limbing trees in the backyard. And she is very introverted. She doesn't like to reach out to other people for anything, generally speaking, if she can help it. That drains her, it doesn't fill her, right? And she doesn't generally want to ask for help. She's going to figure it out for herself. Those are traits that tend to be pretty strong with her. And the fact that she went to a recovery group with a bunch of women that she doesn't know to share this story, filled with, again, as she would say, even though she did nothing wrong, but filled with shame, filled with all of this. And she made the commitment to herself. I found out later in recovery that she made a commitment to herself and to God that she would never, she would start going, and she would go every week, barring, sickness or something. And she has for 8 years. And that she would always share. Every time she would go, she would share. No matter how she was feeling, she would be open about what she was going through.
Wow.
That does not match up with Carrie as a human. It's only, that is only God working and God spurring her. But it's been such an incredible thing to observe, not even as her husband, as like her brother in Christ.
Yes.
As somebody who just gets to see the healing that has taken place where there should be no healing, the trust that's been that takes place where there should be no trust, the friendship and the intimacy that we get to have. It's such an incredible blessing, because it's just like all the darkness for so many years that, as I started off our conversation, right? Like this really like satanic place that our marriage was in because of my actions. And yet God, it was not too big for God, right? God reached in and just completely transformed it.
Yes. Oh, that's so beautiful.
As a homeschooling entrepreneur mama, you are uniquely positioned to impact the kingdom of God both deep and wide. Isn't it time you partnered with a coach to help you close the gap between where you are and where you feel God calling you to go? As a veteran homeschool mama and seasoned entrepreneur and investor myself, I understand the unique challenges you face and as a life coach, former lawyer, and woman of faith, I offer a unique combination of strategy, mindset, and spirit-led discernment to help you identify your next steps. Click the link in the show notes now to schedule a free exploratory call. I would love to partner with you in taking your business and homeschool journey to the next level.
Okay, so take us to the middle one more time of like say that there's somebody in my audience who's walking this road and is in the middle of the story where she's navigating things with a husband who is currently in the cycle, right? And so there might be the letters, there might be the confessions, but there's not yet evidence that there is breakthrough. What would you or what would Carrie say to her as she's in this place?
So one of the first things that Carrie was able to learn in Partners in Process, and one of the first things that she works to instill in ladies in her group is, and honestly, it's one of the first things that I learned in recovery, although just, very different manifestations, is what can I control? What are the things that I can control? Because there's a whole lot of things I can't control. And so for the ladies, like, you cannot control your husband. You cannot make him want help. You cannot make him stop. You cannot make him feel broken or feel bad. What you can do is you can come up with and get feedback on boundaries. You can understand even what boundaries are and what they aren't. You can state those boundaries. You can connect with other women, right? You can, if need, you can come up with a plan on how to be safe as a family, as a wife, as a mom. To some extent, if because there's plenty of folks in our groups that the husband comes to my group and the wife goes to her group, and that's a beautiful thing. Not that it makes for instantaneous healing, but it's like both people are seeking it, both people are working on themselves, and it's incredible to see. And there are so many stories of transformation and healing, that mirror ours and Rick and Patty's and others, and it's so beautiful to see that. But there's also plenty of folks where, there's guys that come to my group and their spouse doesn't go to Carrie's, and there's, the reverse happens. And, sometimes the marriage has dissolved, understandably. There's things that have happened like that, but it's a heartbreaking thing to see. And yet you have choices, it's like, on one hand, if a woman is going to Carrie's group and her husband's not going to mine, or just, not seeking help, doesn't have to be my groups necessarily, but, of course, making sure that he understands that the group is available, making sure that he understands when it is or where it, that's cool for the wife to share that information. But other than that, Carrie really kind of drills down, but don't do any more.
Yeah.
Don't keep asking him if he's going or how did it go, or because it's, number one, that's not going to help him. It's not going to help you. You cannot make him want it. You cannot make him go. That's for him. He's either going to be willing to take some steps or he's not. And it's a tricky thing. Of course, it's a case by case basis, but just understanding what I can control and what I can't control is so huge. And then, so boundaries. I knew the word boundaries. I had no clue how to define boundaries.
Yeah.
I think this is speculation. I think it's accurate to say Carrie probably didn't know how to define that word.
Oh.
So even, just breaking it down to the core of what a boundary is, a boundary is you and your behavior. Nobody can cross your boundary because it's not their boundary. It's yours.
Yes.
And helping women understand that. And then the safety piece, we don't want to see people get divorced. We don't want to see people break up. But we also understand, Carrie understands, that if a husband is unrepentant, if he is not willing to seek change, well, first and foremost, if a wife is there and she's just like, I can't do it. Like, he's been unfaithful. He's done this. I don't care if he gets healthy. I'm done. Like, we get it. I mean, like, obviously she has biblical grounds. We would love it if they're willing to, try to reconcile, both move into a healthy relationship with Christ so that they can then move into a healthy relationship with each other. But, we understand it. But especially if, the husband's unrepentant, if the husband's not seeking healthy living,
Yes.
again, not that Carrie's gonna be like, all right, next week we're going to teach you how to get divorced. No.
Yeah.
But understanding, okay, well, like what can she do to be safe? What can she do to protect the home, to protect her kids?
Mhm.
If her husband is unwilling to change. I mean, in some ways it might be a weird metaphor, but it's kind of like church discipline. I
Yes.
mean, there's levels to this thing. And ultimately we want healing. We want people to seek healing. We want people to seek healthy life.
Mhm.
But if they're not willing to, okay, then I've got choices that I've got to make. And sometimes they're really hard and tough.
Yes. Okay. So we've got that piece, like the cycle's still going, not repentant, or maybe there's the beginning of the crack where the light's starting to shine through.
Yeah.
Take me to the next season. What about the woman who's like, we're moving, there's healing happening, I can see it. And I found almost like over the years that I've been part of recovery, in some ways that's it's a better place, but it brings brand new complexities because we knew the old way.
Right.
And there's this new man emerging, there's this new woman emerging through recovery.
Yeah.
So what I loved that you described, sorry, I'm taking a minute to get to this question, but I just feel like it's such an important piece of the story, right? It's the heart of the story. What you described in your marriage today was friendship, trust, intimacy. What, like, what's the process to get there from that initial, I think we're moving in the right direction? How do we walk this out? How do I trust again? How do I open my heart again?
Yeah. The number one phrase that you're going to hear from Carrie all the time, like put it on a t-shirt, is believable behavior.
Oh
So
man, I like her.
from the get-go, Patty made that very clear. Like again, Logan's been a liar and a manipulator and a gaslighter for years. So you're not going to trust his words. You're not going to trust his promises, because we know what that's looked like. You can trust believable behavior over an extended period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Not perfect behavior, but believable behavior, progressive victory. Well, I should say believable behavior you can trust, whether it's healthy or unhealthy, right? But I mean, in terms of building trust, yeah, believable behavior that's moving progressively. But yeah, I mean, at the same time, if your husband is saying all these wonderful, glorious things, and his believable behavior is he still treats you the same way, he still treats the kids the same way, he still interacts with people at work the same way, and is off doing the same things, well, that's his believable behavior. So you can trust that. But yeah, building trust, it started with that. And then, I mean, that's, that's a common thread for the last 8 years, and will be forever. Because I mean, at the end of the day, believable behavior should be at the core of any relationship.
Yes.
The other piece, and this is where I step back and I'm like, it is such an incredible blessing to be able to witness this. But Carrie fully submitted to a process and godly people. She didn't just trust that I was going to do things differently. But she did trust that God was working through these people, through her mentor, through my mentor, and a whole mentorship team of guys. Rick was my primary mentor, sponsor, but I mean, there were a whole team of guys that knew like all my ins and outs, that knew my story. They knew my triggers. They knew how I was doing day to day, week to week. And because one of the things that we tried to do once I first, like, I got the ultimatum and I started doing some things differently, was Carrie became my accountability partner.
I bet I know how that went.
Well, and it's a very common thing, because it seems like, okay, well, like, well, she's my wife. Of course she should be my accountability partner, right? Like she should be the best motivation. And a lot of times the wife wants to be the accountability partner.
Yep.
And I don't want to go too deep on that because I'm the dude, but I mean, there's some power and control there, right? It's like, I want to know what my man's doing.
Yes.
And so like I would be at the bank and, shoot her a text and be like, there's an attractive teller and I did do a double take earlier, but I'm just really trying to focus on not looking at her and I'll let you know when I'm gone. That's a super appropriate text to send to my mentor.
Yeah.
That is not a text that a wife should be receiving.
Yeah.
And it is not because that stuff is going to be kept secret. It's not because that stuff is, hid under the rug. It's that the nitty gritty ins and outs of how my day is going and how I'm responding to temptation should not be flooding my wife's phone.
Yes.
Because every time it's like another punch to the gut, another stab wound, another reminder of what her husband struggles with that has nothing to do with it's not because she's not giving me enough something. It's not because she's not enough. It has nothing to do with that. I mean, this goes all the way back to the start of our conversation.
Yes.
I train myself to chase after new and different.
Mm-hmm.
And so these temptations and whether I respond in a healthy way or not, these things need to be put out there to recovery brothers, not that my wife should be holding me accountable. I mean,
Yes.
there's a whole host of reasons why a wife should not be the accountability partner for her husband, but that's a big one. And that was honestly, that was hard for me and Carrie when my mentor and his wife told us, they're like, yeah, that's not happening. We're not going to do that anymore. That was hard for both of us because on Carrie's end, she wanted to be my accountability partner. She didn't want to give that up. And then I think on my end, I think it was probably easier. It's like, well, I'm comfortable with Carrie knowing my stuff. I don't necessarily want another guy to know all my stuff. And so there was definitely some ego and pride and stuff that I had to let go of. But that was a giant piece that we had to walk into.
And what I love about that, and the reason I was like, I know how that goes, is like, even in my own marriage, my husband and I have had times where one or the other of us was trying to grow in an area and tried to do just the two of us. And
Right.
it's such a hard burden on the marriage because like, I remember us having conversations where it's like, I don't want to be your dad. I don't want to be your mom.
Yep.
Like we're supposed to be in union and co-laboring to build this legacy in our families. And when we're kind of peeking over the shoulder of the other one, it just it disrupts the intimacy. I don't know how to put better words around it than that. But yeah, it's like I feel like this is a takeaway no matter where my people are as far as like what they're struggling with in their marriages.
You can't be each other's coach.
Exactly. Like we have to protect the union above all else. And that's what I hear you saying. So I think that's so beautiful. Okay.
Yeah. Well, just one thing I want to say on that. I mean, because when you were asking about recovery groups and I was sharing, what made prodigals so different, right? And that idea of I'm not trying to hurt people's feelings, but it's okay if feelings get hurt. Like, well, it's a little bit different when it's my wife. I do need to be intentional to not hurt her if I can help it. I mean, I can't control if she gets her feelings hurt, but I can control how I talk to her. I can control the things I say. So even now, like generally speaking, in a very healthy state, in a healthy marriage relationship, I don't talk to her the way that I would talk to somebody in recovery, or like I coach clients with personal finances and I grill them and get on them in a similar way to recovery. I'm not going to talk to Carrie the same way. That's not an appropriate way to talk to my wife, even if it might be legitimate feedback that a client would need to hear. But it's like, well, it's my wife. It's going to be a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. And I think then what is the call on both spouses in endeavoring to have a healthy union is that we submit to community that will call us to account. And that's what I hear you saying, that is very powerful, that both of you were willing to walk into that space and say, I'm willing to hear the brutal, hard truths from someone else. And therefore, love of my life, you can grow in trust and in comfort that I will be safe for you because I have these voices that are right there and that are calling me to more.
And that's where most of my conversation here has been from I statements. It's talking about my stuff because I'm not here to preach. I'm not here to talk about other people and what they need to do. But I can't not move away from I statements a little bit. Part of the initial connection that, even though, I'm not a woman. And so when I was reaching out to you about being on the show, I was like, I know I'm not a woman, but is just faith-based homeschool. Now, I can't speak for your geographical region, but at least up here, there's kind of a, there's sort of a community of Christian homeschool families. And of course, these are generalizations, but there's a kind of sort of way, like, because I grew up homeschooled. I was the baby of 5 of homeschooled. And so being homeschooled. And there are some general statements that are not always true, but they are oftentimes true. I've seen them true many times. And this thing where, the man makes all the decisions and the woman is solely, not primarily, solely focused on raising the kids, taking care of the house. Mm-hmm. And we could debate on the healthiness of that if everything's going well. Yeah. When if that man lets sin take a foothold in his life, and it doesn't have to be sexual sin, but if that man lets Satan have a foothold in his life, now that woman, that mom, that wife is being asked to be this good little wife and be submissive and love her husband and take care of the kids. And the husband is living in sin, but she has no place to talk to him. Yeah. And again, I realize these are blanket statements. These are not always true, but I promise you, I've seen these things played out so many times, especially in the Christian community, especially in the homeschool community. A lot of times that man is not part of a community that gives him tough feedback.
Yes.
And that's just true of people in general. Like, most of us are not surrounding ourselves with people who poke us in the gut and call us out on our BS.
Yes.
Because it's not fun. Yes. It's not polite.
Yes.
And so if that man is not surrounded by at least 2 or 3 guys, if not more, that know all of his stuff, that know all his dirty laundry, that know what he struggles with, mm-hmm. and he respects them enough and gives them permission to speak into his life. If all of those things are not in place, then it's a recipe for so much heartache, and it's a recipe for generational trauma. It's a recipe for resentment. And to be honest, I mean, and I didn't come on your podcast to even say these words today, but like, it's a recipe for and everyone has to take ownership for their own choices, but it's a recipe for people to turn away from the church. It's a recipe for people to call out Christianity and call out the Bible, because people are that is not the image that God, I mean, I want to be really careful saying what God says or what God thinks for us, but that I do not believe that's the image of a family that God has for us. I mean, I can definitely say that, because God calls us to surround ourselves with wise counsel, right? He calls us to be accountable. So I'm sorry for getting preachy.
No, Logan, like this. Yes. And I'm just going to say, I mean, this is one of the things I feel like the Lord just keeps bringing up in this conversation of She Considers a Field that we've been having for the podcast has been going since February. Like, this idea of, I think so often as women, we love the Lord and we want to follow his word. And then there's this call to submit. And the picture of submission that we've been taught, actually, and I just keep hearing the Lord be like, the union, like the strength of the union requires 2 strong parties in the union with the God over all. So like, both parties must show up in their fullness. And for us as women to think that our job is to sit down and shut up, sorry, I'm saying it, sit down and shut up and just like minimize our feelings and minimize our discernment and minimize our intuition, we're harming the family and the legacy. I think what you said is so beautiful, Logan. Like, and I was so captivated by what you talked about with, like, it was Carrie saying enough's enough, that really required, because I think what we, in our minds as women, there's this little like be nice message of just like, and kind of what you alluded to, where it's like, oh, how amazing that she stayed.
the staying, if tell me if I've got this, the staying was not the trigger for transformation. It was the threat to go. This is bad enough that you have broken this, and I will have to take drastic measures. And that was when you were required to look at the circumstances and say, am I just gonna continue, or am I gonna fight for it to look different?
Because I mean, think about the common threads that we've talked about here, and I am beyond exceedingly grateful that I get to go home to my wife, right? That I'm so incredibly grateful that we are together, and I fully recognize, and I don't like to think about the fact that I don't deserve that, you know, what things would have looked like if Carrie had left me the moment she first heard that I was sexually unfaithful.
Yeah.
And yet she absolutely had that right. She could have done that.
Mm-hmm.
But the common threads of her staying with me was comfortable for me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would be an exaggeration, I think, to say like I got to have my cake and eat it too, but it was something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I didn't get was the human consequences. I certainly, there were plenty of natural consequences. I mean, the self-hatred and despair. I mean, there was plenty of consequences, but I was also spared from so many consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm not trying to like live in a time machine. I mean, what happened. I'm incredibly grateful for our story, and Carrie also is incredibly grateful for our story. And we're together, you know, it's like we look back on the darkness because it magnifies the light that is our life now.
Yes.
But in terms of like, you know, not all of our story is prescriptive, right? It's all descriptive.
Yes.
So when we're coaching other folks on how to be healthy, it's like, yeah, like if somebody else is in those shoes, we would not coach them to sit in survival mode for 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love what you said. It's not prescriptive, it's descriptive. Like, this is the way ours played out. And in part because of how ours played out, we can turn around and say, like, that's not our recommendation, right?
Right.
There was a cost there.
But yeah,
But
Carrie was dragged through years of additional abuse through that whole time. That's
right. And it's so beautiful to reflect on, Logan. Just what you described is the reality of our lives, right? This convergence of consequence and grace living together. And out of that, when we really submit to being faithful with what we know and what we're able to do, which you guys did in that time where Carrie said, no more. Like, I know enough now to say I can't do this anymore. And then you stumblingly, haltingly started moving forward to the degree that you were able to. Yeah. And now you can look back after 8 years and go, trust, intimacy, friendship, love, and just the grace that is. And what a message of hope. I want to just say, I feel like this is a perfect place to put a bow on things. And I want to give a little sneak peek to all of you guys, all of my listeners. We're going to have a part 2. And Logan and I are haltingly and with much reverence going to talk through, in light of his experience and story, and in light of both of our passions to raise families that are healthy and well-rounded in all regards, we're going to talk through what does it look like to raise our children to have a healthy relationship to sexuality. So that's coming next. But before we close, I just want to say, Logan, thank you so much. Any final thing that you want to say to my strong women that are listening right now?
So I feel this very strongly to share this. And again, the overthinker in me is like, should I say it? Because again, I'm the man. And in this...
Yes, you should say it. Whatever it is. Yes, you should say it.
So if you are listening and you have been wounded in this area, please seek healing.
Yes.
It's not your fault, and it's not fair, and you didn't cause it. And yet, I mean, Carrie has seen, and I have seen so many families, so many wives, because of those true statements. It wasn't their fault. They didn't cheat. They didn't do it. they've used those statements as a reason to not seek help, to not go to therapy, to not join a recovery group, to not work on themselves, to not do. And it is literally the same thing as if somebody got stabbed and they're like, well, I didn't choose to get stabbed, I'm not going to go get help.
Yes.
Like, that's your choice. You can do that.
Yeah.
But Carrie was wounded. Carrie was hurt in this way, in a deeply traumatic way. And when we have seen families where, a husband he's done all these terrible things, and yet he goes into recovery and he has experienced true transformative healing, and his wife, again, for a lot of those same reasons I just mentioned, has not embraced recovery. It breaks my heart. It breaks Carrie's heart, because that woman, generally speaking, she's kind of forever frozen in time.
Yes.
She's forever this broken, wounded woman that is not healed. Like, maybe the blood's dried. She's not healed.
Yes.
And if nothing else, for her relationship with Christ, right? For her relationship with, if she's got kids, even if I feel kind of bad saying it as the dude, but Carrie's not here on the podcast. I'm sharing straight from what Carrie would tell you, straight from what Carrie would say, is it's not about fault. It's, if I need healing, I need to go get healing.
That's right. One of the things that I've kind of grabbed hold of in my own healing from, just life, the things that happen, is let me not indignify the wound by refusing to give it meaning through Christ, right? Like, this is where we're kind of spoiled rotten as believers, that, Romans 8:28's promise, like, all things work together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And the way they can, it's not a guarantee if we don't allow it, but the way they can work together for good is because we get to look more like God. He touches those wounds, and there's that in Isaiah, it talks about where something prickly grows, the myrtle will grow, something like that. About all these kind of prickly, like bristly plants, and then these beautiful soft things. And that's our process too, that our scars become our beauty marks. And so I think, Logan, I think you can really own that invitation, and in some ways very powerfully, because you lived a life where you caused the pain, and so the importance. Like, when you speak of the importance of healing, it's very powerful, because you had been in a role where it would be tempting to be like, oh, don't look, I didn't hurt you, everything's fine. And for you to go, no, what happened to you matters. And it's important for you to receive the touch of the Father in this area of pain and abuse, so that you don't indignify your hurt by missing your life in bitterness and resentment and hurt and anger. All men are the same, like that. You can't trust them. You just got to live on your own. Those are, we make choices. When we choose not to heal, we kind of create a definition for how the world works that's colored by our pain and by our hurt. And then we lose out on the vulnerability and the joy and the love with our children, with, another partner, with the same partner, with our family members, extended family and friends. And so I think your invitation is really beautiful. And I know whoever listens to this finds their way to this podcast that needs it. It's a blessing. It's a blessing to choose to hear that. Logan, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. So 2 questions. First, for my people that need more, where this has sparked something in them, or they already knew they were struggling, whether women or men, what do they do? Where do they go from here?
So my primary thing here is just to shed light on what is available, but on a more broad level. So I won't promise any one organization that you can go on their website or you can start attending, this group that it's worldwide and you will for sure find healing there, because every group is different. Every therapist is different. Every organization is different. They're as strong as what they believe and who leads that group. I mean, that's my opinion. I have been to some great recovery groups that are under the same umbrella as some pretty shallow recovery groups. I'll put it that way. Mm-hmm. But there are sexual betrayal trauma therapists specifically trained for that. There are Christian sexual betrayal trauma therapists. There are, same thing with sexual addiction. There are Christian therapists specifically trained to help people struggling with sexual addiction. 9 years ago, I didn't think that was possible. I didn't know that was a thing. So just know that is available, but obviously, depending on where you live, I don't know who specifically in what groups. I mean, a couple things I would just say is if you're looking for healing, find a group that has people, especially the people leading it, that have the type of healing you would want, that have the type of life that you would want. Not because they're perfect, but they've been in the trenches that you're in on some level. Maybe they have a really similar story, maybe not, but they've been in those trenches and they're further down the path than where you're at. Yes. If you intentionally seek that out, you will find it. Now, if you live in a town of 100 people and you are 3 hours away from the nearest town, it might be hard. And you might have to go online. Like, I get it, but there are resources available.
Awesome. And then how about you? How can my people connect with you?
Primarily, most of my stuff is funneled through Instagram. I put a lot of work into that, just to try to reach people on that scale. And what you're not going to find is B-roll of me sipping coffee with a trendy Bible verse. I'm not trying to throw shade at people, but maybe I am. I don't know. I mean, my videos, I'm trying to get to the meat of it. So yeah. I'm sharing. I share stuff from my life. I share stuff from my recovery. I share stuff from recovery in general. Some of it is specific to sexual addiction recovery, but all of it, or I'd say almost all of it, is relevant either if you just want to better understand how addiction works, or even if you want to better understand how to work on destructive habits. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is. It's not whether you consider yourself an addict or not, sexual or not. All of us have destructive patterns and habits. In some ways, I'm blessed that my areas of struggle were such a high stakes area that I had no choice. Either I needed to get serious help or I was going to lose my family.
Yes.
So if you have a problem that has lower stakes, like, okay, there's no reason why you can't attack it with the same intensity.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. That's so good. Logan, I cannot thank you enough. I so appreciate you being here and can't wait till the next one.
Thanks, Anna.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of She Considers a Field. If you found value in this episode, I would be so grateful if you would leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts, and be sure to share with a friend who needs some encouragement on her journey today too. Until next time, remember, you've got this because he's got you.